Billy Martin can be described as a natural-born fighter, both on and off the field. However, could all those fights between the white lines during the day and under the neon lights at night destroy Billy's chances of becoming immortalized in baseball's hallowed halls? Now, before we get into the video, I'm gonna need you to leave a like on this video and smash the subscribe button, which is the best way to show your support here on the channel. And finally, if you want to get active, ring that bell and comment down below your thoughts on this Billy Martin story. Alfred Manuel Martin, yes, Alfred Martin, was born on May 16th, 1928 in Berkeley, California, to his mother Jenny and his estranged father Alfred Martin I. Now, his father left Martin and his mother shortly after his birth, leaving them to fend for themselves. Young Alfred would soon be dubbed the name Billy, due to his friends in school misunderstanding his Italian grandmother calling him Belite, which means beautiful in Italian. His name wasn't the only thing he inherited from the women in his life. Many say that Martin's intensity and feistiness came straight from the woman who birthed him, his mother Jenny. Now, the circumstances Billy was dealt with and the attributes given to him by his mother seemed it could set him up for two very different outcomes in life. The first was a hard-nosed ball player who turned into one of the most revered managers in the game's history. Or the second, that was a man throwing right hooks in bars only to find himself behind bars just hours later. Luckily for Billy, he was a master at both. Now, just like I mentioned, Martin was a master at the game of baseball. However, like everything else in his life, he had to fight his way to the top. During his 4 years of high school, Martin improved on the diamond as he raised his batting average from .210 as a sophomore to an outstanding .450 during his senior year. Now, that second part about him being a fighter, well, that turned out to be a double-edged sword for Billy, as he engaged in many on-field fights, which coincidentally forced him off the team and left him unsigned by any major league clubs following his graduation in 1946. This left Martin to sign with an independent league team, the nearby Oakland Oaks. Now, perhaps this turn of events was a blessing in disguise for Billy, as upon his arrival with the Oakland Oaks, he would meet his first true father figure, the Oaks manager, Casey Stengel. Billy was infatuated with Stengel, and in recognizing this, Stengel would take Billy under his wing and teach him everything he knew about the game. 1948 was a big year for the Oaks, Martin, and Stengel, as the Oaks won the Pacific Coast League pennant. Martin finished the season with a .277 batting average and 42 runs driven in, and Stengel got hired by the New York Yankees the following season. In spite of Billy's baseball daddy, Casey Stengel, taking the managerial job in New York, Martin would improve his play with the Oaks in '49, as he hit .286 with 92 RBIs and 12 home runs. This performance and Martin's past relationship with Stengel in Oakland would lead the Yankees to sign the second baseman and add them to their roster come 1950. Now, Martin made history in his debut with the Yankees, as in his first at-bat, he doubled off the Green Monster in Boston to drive in 3 runs and then record another hit in his second at-bat, a single to drive in 2 more runs, which came in that same inning. This made him the first ball player to record 2 hits in 1 inning during his major league debut. Now, Martin would not turn out to be the most productive hitter, as he only managed to have a .250 batting average with 64 home runs and 333 RBIs over a span of 11 major league seasons. However, he was at his best in pinstripes, as he batted .313, drove in 188, and popped 30 home runs while with New York during 7 seasons. Billy was also a terrific World Series hitter, as he batted .333 throughout each of the 5 World Series he played in. But unfortunately, his time with the Yankees came to an abrupt end in 1957 after a fight at the Copacabana in New York spilled into the papers. Allegedly, a bowling team was heckling performer Sammy Davis Jr., while Mickey Mantle, Whitey Ford, Hank Bauer, and Billy Martin were in attendance at the nightclub. As the story goes, a member of the bowling team was knocked out cold in the coat room by none other than Hank Bauer. However, the papers really took the rap and was the one to blame. Now, it seemed this incident was a perfect opportunity for the Yankees general manager, George Wise, who despised Martin, to ship him out of New York at the first opportunity he got. And he did just that. Martin would be shipped to the Athletics, and then he would bounce around to teams like the Tigers, Indians, Reds, and finally ending his playing career with the Twins in 1961. Now, following his playing career, Martin would remain in professional baseball as he was a part of the Minnesota Twins organization, starting out as a scout and then becoming a major league coach for the Twins in 1965. Many believed that despite the Twins' success in 1965, as they won the AL pennant that season, this promotion of Martin's was a telltale sign that Billy would one day be named the Twins' manager. Now, that day would come nearly 4 years later, as Martin was finally named the Twins' skipper for the 1969 season. With Martin at the helm, the Twins played an old-school, hard-nosed, 1900 style of baseball that proved to be a recipe for success, as the Twins ran away with the West that year, winning 97 games. But you have to remember, many times that hard-nosed mentality followed Billy outside the lines, and Billy ended up going over the line with one of his best players, starting pitcher Dave Boswell. While at a bar, a drunken Boswell approached Billy by saying, quote, "There's that short Italian," and proceeded to throw a punch. But it was Boswell, not Billy, who ended up on the floor that night. Now, unfortunately, it was Billy, not Boswell, who got canned at the end of the season despite the team improving by 18 wins and making the postseason. Now, Billy would get another crack at it 2 years later with the Detroit Tigers in 1971 in hopes of turning them around. And he did. The Cats from Motown won 91 games in Martin's first year at the helm, 12 more than the year before. Then, in Martin's second season, he led the team to the playoffs, where they would lose the American League pennant to the eventual world champions, Oakland A's. The 1973 season was not as successful for Martin and the Tigers, as Detroit finished in third place in the Eastern Division. Nevertheless, Martin did have some unusual success, as he was responsible for finding eventual center fielder Ron LaFleur in a Michigan State prison. But, just like Minnesota, Martin's time in Detroit came to an abrupt end after a game against the Indians. Martin suspected Cleveland pitcher Gaylord Perry was throwing spitballs, an illegal pitch. When the umpires did not call out Gaylord for doing so, Billy ordered his pitchers to do just the same. Now, after Martin told the press of his doing after the game, he was suspended by the American League president Joe Cronin for breaching league rules. Apparently, this was a last straw for the Tigers' GM Jim Campbell, who fired Martin before his suspension by Cronin ran out. This time, Billy would be without a job for only a week, as a Texas Rangers owner, Bob Short, hired Martin to man his struggling ball club. And now, there was really nothing Martin could do to save the Rangers in '73, as they were pretty much already dead in the water. However, 1974 was when Martin's magic came through. Billy's Rangers took a major step in 1974 as they won 84 games that season, marking the second time the club won 80 games or more during their brief history in Texas. Martin's 74 Rangers are also still the only team to finish above 500 after 2 consecutive 100-loss seasons. However, one can compare Martin's managerial experiences to a broken record. no matter how many times you play it back, it always trips up in the same spot. Now, ironically, Martin's departure from Texas was in fact over a record that was played over the PA system at Arlington Stadium on July 20th, 1975. The Rangers' new owner, Brad Corbett, wanted "Take Me Out to the Ball Game" to be played during the 7th inning stretch. But, in keeping with Billy's new cowboy theme, Martin insisted the public address announcer play, quote, "Thank God I'm a Cowboy." And following through with Billy's wishes, the PA announcer played "Thank God I'm a Cowboy." Unfortunately, that would be the last time Martin was in fact a Cowboy, as an outraged Corbett fired Martin immediately following the game. Billy Martin's next stop would be a bit of a homecoming, as he received a call from the new Yankees owner, George Steinbrenner, who was looking to return baseball's most revered franchise back to their former glory. Billy's start in New York was similar to his start in Texas, as he was thrown into a blazing forest fire that he stood no chance of extinguishing. This meant 1976 was when Billy truly got to leave his mark on the Yankees. In that year's spring training, Martin set the record straight, laying down the new ground rules and philosophy of what would be Yankee baseball. A significant part of that philosophy was calling out his own players, or holding them accountable when their miscues on the field cost the team a win, and let's just say Billy certainly wasn't subtle about it. Now, perhaps Martin's semi-psychotic philosophy of ripping players a new asshole was perceived as Bush League. However, this bulldog mentality Martin woven into that Yankee clubhouse put them back on top. This is because the New York Yankees were able to win the 76 pennant following a Chris Chambliss ALCS walk-off home run in Game 5 against Kansas City. As a result, New York returned to the World Series for the first time in 15 years. Now, although Billy's first World Series as a manager didn't go his or the Yankees' way, as they were swept by the defending champions Cincinnati Reds, it was clear Martin was their man. Moving into the 76-77 offseason, it was clear to many that the Yankees were still in need of a major power bat, and with Steinbrenner having deep pockets, it wasn't a question of if the Yankees were going to add to their lineup, it was just a question of who would be the right fit. Well, in Martin's mind, that right fit was A's outfielder Joe Rudi, while the boss wanted a different A's outfielder, Reggie Jackson. And since it was George's money, it would be Jackson, not Rudi, who would be shipped from California to New York. Now, to say Martin was pissed that Steinbrenner ignored his input and signed Reggie instead of Rudi would be an understatement. However, what really sparked Billy's personal vendetta against Jackson was the fact he was not invited to Jackson's introductory press conference to the Yankees. This was a slap in the face to Martin and made him feel Jackson was too much of a prima donna who wouldn't listen to orders. Now, perhaps Martin was correct in his assumption about Jackson's cockiness. Now, who could blame him after Reggie was on the record alienating his teammates and Captain Thurman Munson by saying, quote, "I'm the straw who stirs the drink." The tensions between Billy and Reggie all came to rear its ugly head one June afternoon at Fenway. With the Yankees half a game behind the Boston Red Sox in the division, Jim Rice hit what should have been a bloop single into right field. But instead, that bloop hit turned into a double on the count of Reggie Jackson not hustling after the ball. This lack of hustle infuriated Martin, and he immediately pulled Jackson out of the game, replacing him with Paul Blair. Confused and equally infuriated, Jackson stormed to the Yankee dugout to meet his manager at the top step. This led to all hell breaking loose. Martin and Jackson were nose to nose, hurling insults at each other with the whole nation watching on NBC. In fact, Jackson recalls telling Martin, quote, "All the alcohol you've been drinking must be going to your brain." Things only got worse that summer when Martin doubled down on the idea of putting Jackson in his place after he put him down in the Yankee lineup. This move obviously didn't sit well with the big boss, but as long as Billy was sitting in the dugout, it would be him calling the shots on the field. Now, surprisingly enough, the Yankee fans didn't seem to mind this unheard of lineup construction. In fact, the fans felt Billy was doing what they all wish they could do. That is, stand up to and shove one down their boss's throat. Eventually, Martin moved Reggie back to the cleanup spot. And when he did so, it made him look like a genius, as New York would proceed to win 41 of their last 54 games of the season, setting themselves up to win another American League pennant. The Yankees would meet the Royals again in the ALCS, where Martin showcased his managerial magic twice throughout the series. First was in Game 4. Up a run, Billy called on his closer, Sparky Lyle, in the 4th inning to record the final 16 outs, and he did just that to keep the Yankees alive in the series. Then, in Game 5, Martin conceived an even crazier idea. This was benching Reggie Jackson to start an elimination game. Martin made the move because he wanted the more equipped Paul Blair to defend against the speedy Royal squad. However, he did call on Reggie Jackson to pinch hit in the 8th inning with his team down 2 runs. Jackson would eventually come through in that at-bat, and New York would win Game 5 and return to the World Series. Ironically enough, it would be Reggie Jackson who would come up big again for the Yankees in that 1977 World Series, as in Game 6, Jackson would crack 3 home runs out of the park in that clinching game, helping deliver the Yankees their first championship in 15 years. Reggie would also become the second player ever, aside from Babe Ruth, to send 3 balls over the wall during a World Series game. After the game, each member of the Yankees were understandably on cloud 9, but one would have to admit, it was an interesting sight to see Martin and Jackson sharing laughs together on a couch in the clubhouse following a season that was filled with tension, animosity, vengeance, and venom towards one another. The next season of 1978, it seemed the Yankees were suffering from the ever-so-common World Series hangover, and by mid-June, New York was 7 games out of first place in the East and testing their owners' patience. This meant fingers started to fly at whoever was a ringleader of this embarrassing circus act, and of course, Billy would be to blame. Now, with the Yankees in free-fall mode, the wound between Jackson and his manager started to open up again. It all started on July 17th as New York faced Kansas City in a tight extra inning game. With Munson on second base and Jackson up to bat, Billy called for a bunt. However, Reggie decided to defy his manager's orders and swing at the first 2 pitches, and then, with 2 strikes, proceeded to square around and pop out. A furious Martin wanted Jackson suspended for the remainder of the season after the game, but came to an agreement with George to suspend Reggie for 5 days. Upon his return, Jackson did a number of interviews, citing that he felt there were several subtle racial epithets driven at him from Billy Martin. However, many of Billy's players, including a number of black players like Willie Randolph, denied this narrative of Martin treating his players differently based on the color of their skin. However, at the same time, the man upstairs was trying to concoct a very clever way of shipping Billy out of New York. Eventually, the word got out that George was in contact with the White Sox owner Bill Veeck and proposed the idea of switching managers. Now, when this rumor hit Billy's ears, he felt he had no choice but to fight his way out once again, this time with his mouth. Billy was quoted by a few sports writers as saying the two, George and Reggie, deserve each other. He said one's a born liar, Jackson, and the other is convicted, Steinbrenner. His convicted comment towards Steinbrenner was in reference to his illegal campaign contributions to former President Richard Nixon in 1974. And now, with the possibility of Billy getting booted out at any time following these comments, he received a phone call from his agent, Eddie Sapar. Eddie advised Martin to resign from the Yankees for health reasons. Doing this would force the Yankees to continue to pay Martin for the remainder of the '78 season. And with that, Martin was without a job again. However, this time he had an unexpected wave of defense on his side. Shortly following Martin's departure, Steinbrenner felt the burn from his paying customers, the Yankee fans. With the fans outraged, the boss knew he had gone a step too far, and he was eager to bring back Billy as soon as possible. However, there was one big problem. George had already given Bob Lemon a contract to manage the remainder of the 1978 and 1979 season. But with Old Timers Day scheduled for just 5 days after Martin's resignation, George had a wild idea. His plan was to have Billy attend the festivities of Old Timers Day at Yankee Stadium and be introduced by Bob Shepard as the new Yankee manager for the 1980 season. And now, although this wacky plan somehow all worked out, it did give Martin a 2-year lead period before he was allowed to throw on the pinstripes once again. The other problem was the Yankees' performance on the field the remainder of that 1978 season. Under new interim manager Bob Lemon, New York pulled off a tremendous comeback as they won their division, then the American League pennant, and topped all things off by winning their second consecutive World Championship. This meant the new World Championship manager would head into the new 1979 season with only 1 more year remaining on his contract and with no plans from the boss extending it. However, no matter how many opportunities Martin was given to rewrite his wrong, he somehow found a new and creative way to shoot himself in the foot again. This time, it was in a bar during that 78-79 offseason when Martin was approached by a reporter from the Reno Gazette, Ray Haggard, who was trying to get the scoop on what Martin's and Jackson's relationship would be like come the 1980 season. Now, after a drunken Martin delivered a slurred answer to the reporter's question, his mood quickly changed, and he proceeded to snap at Haggard, demanding to see his notes. After Ray refused, Billy's fist met Ray's face with fierce power, leaving Ray with a black eye and a broken nose. Now, this incident surely seemed to leave Billy on the sidelines again, but surprisingly, it didn't. This was because Eddie and Ray came to an agreement to make a public apology for both parties, and with the boss on board, Billy was off the hook. Then Billy got another lucky break, if you want to call it luck, because the 1979 Yankees suffered another World Series hangover and a number of injuries to players like Reggie Jackson and Goose Gossage early during that 79 season. This would leave New York in 4th place by June 18th, and their performance motivated George to bring Martin back 9 months before originally scheduled. Upon Billy's return, he had his squad riding the turnaround train again, but the train suffered a derailment following an unexpected death. Yankee captain Thurman Munson died while attempting to land his small plane at Akron Regional Airport in Ohio. This death crushed the Yankee season, as this time they were unable to pull off the comeback. New York finished a distant 4th place in 1979 under Martin. Although this time, Billy wasn't to blame for the team's struggles, and he was expected to return to the Yankees in 1980. However, like always, Martin found himself in a bar blitzed, and this time battling it out with a Marshmallow Man. Wait, a Marshmallow Man? Yeah, a Marshmallow Man. Apparently, a marshmallow salesman by the name of Joseph Cooper told Martin he should not have won the American League Manager of the Year award, which Cooper believed should have gone to Dick Williams or Earl Weaver. Martin replied by mocking the man's profession, and then in the process angered him to the point where Cooper challenged Martin to a fight. And Martin responded by wagering $500 that he could knock out Cooper with one punch. And not surprisingly, Billy did just that. After the word got out, however, Billy was busted by the boss again after busting another man's chops. By February of 1980, Billy got a call from another larger-than-life baseball owner, Charles O'Finley, as this time he was given the opportunity to return to the place where it all started, Oakland, California, and manage the Major League Baseball club, Oakland Athletics. Per usual, Martin's arrival was a positive one, as he turned the A's around, improving the squad by 29 games that season, finishing the 1980 campaign in second place in the AL West. The next season, in 81, the A's came out swinging, starting out the season breaking the record for the best start in baseball history, as Billy's A's won their first 11 games of the season. This exciting new brand of baseball for Oakland was soon dubbed as Billy Ball. In fact, this new fad was soon turned into a marketing campaign by the A's, and its spokesman was none other than the man himself, Billy Martin. Now, the strongest part of the A's that season was their starting pitching. The Oakland rotation went on to throw 94 complete games and accumulate a 1.42 ERA that season. However, there was a small bump in the road, as a baseball season was interrupted by the players' strike on June the 12th. The strike lasted for 2 months. Baseball would pick back up on August the 9th, and upon resumption, the season was split into 2 halves. This set up a playoff series between the team that obtained the best record before the strike, the A's, and the team that obtained the best record after the strike, the Royals. Eventually, Martin's A's would sweep the Royals in that playoff series and go on to face the Yankees in the ALCS. This meant Martin returned to New York, where prior to Game 1, he associated with his old boss, George Steinbrenner, and received an exuberant ovation from the Yankee faithful. Now, unfortunately for the A's and Martin, they would get swept at the hands of the Yankees during that year's ALCS. Despite the loss, there was no doubt Billy was able to pull off another unlikely comeback with another unlikely group of players. In 1982, things took a turn for the worst, as Billy Ball seemed to lose its magic. The team made a total 360, as by the All-Star break, they were 38-50, 12 games back, and in 6th place. None of the A's starting pitchers would match their 1981 form, leading many baseball historians to believe Billy was to blame as he overworked each of his starters throughout the previous 1981 season. With Oakland finishing in the cellar, Billy was let go of again, just 2 weeks after the season ended. Now, per usual, Billy's departure in Oakland wasn't due to his on-field managing, but rather his off-field exploits. Incidents included considerable drinking and traveling with a mistress while on the road. The last straw came when Martin trashed his own office after team officials refused to give him a loan to pay a tax debt. With Martin out on the open market again and the team in the Bronx underperforming, George Steinbrenner would call on Old Reliable to help turn his ball club around. The start for Billy and the Yankees in 1983 turned out to be status quo for Billy ball clubs, as the Yankees immediately improved under the watchful eye of Martin, and many thought with Jackson now a part of the California Angels, perhaps a third time would be the charm for Martin in New York. But in all honesty, let's call it for what it is. That is wishful thinking. Also, if you're familiar with the saga, as you should be by now, nothing was going to change with baseball's bad boy. The first thing that got Martin on the hot seat upon his return to New York was when a story got published regarding his extramarital affairs. Apparently, a group of New York writers caught a glimpse of a woman by the name of Jill, now Martin's widow, passing notes to Billy while he was in the dugout during a game in Milwaukee. This particular story led to questioning regarding Martin's attentiveness towards the game. Billy's response to the mess was to blame the New York press, and one writer in particular, the New York Post's Henry Heck. Billy would go on to call a team meeting, and in this meeting, he told his players that they were not allowed to speak to or give any insight about the ball club to Mr. Heck. In other words, Billy tried to single-handedly ruin this writer's career. Billy was also involved in one of the most infamous games in baseball history during 1983. That was the Pine Tar game. With the Royals taking on the Yankees at Yankee Stadium, George Brett hit a home run to right field with 2 outs in the top of the 9th. However, after Brett crossed home plate, Billy challenged the home run call on the grounds that the amount of pine tar on Brett's bat broke league rules. Eventually, Brett was ruled out and the home run disallowed. This ended the game with the Yankees winning 4-3. However, the Royals would go on to protest the game, and it was upheld by AL President Lee MacPhail. The game was resumed 25 days later on August 18th. And officially ended with the Royals winning 5-4. The Yankees did not play well after this contest against the Royals, and despite ending the season 91-71, which was a 12-game improvement from the year before, it still left New York 7 games back of the Orioles in the division at season's end. It also left Martin out of a job again as a Yankees manager, as George removed Billy from the managerial role and instead kept him a part of the organization as a special advisor. Billy's replacement as a Yankee manager would be Yogi Berra. Now you might think George giving Billy the advisory role was just a nice gesture and an effort not to cause bad blood after firing Martin just a year after giving Billy a multi-year contract. Unfortunately, as always, it was for George's, not Billy's best interest, because after the Yankees had an embarrassing 1984 season and struggled to get off the pot in 85, there he was, suitable man, just one holler down the hall, who could be thrown into another forest fire. Yes, Billy was hired again to manage the Yankees as he was implemented midway in 1985. But this time, the players felt enough was enough, and many disapproved of the move, as they all knew what was to come down the pike. During round 4, Martin once again found himself in a bar drunk and ready to rumble. This time, it would be with one of his own players, starting pitcher Ed Whitson. Whitson was one of the Yankees' new acquisitions during that year's offseason, and with the Yankees well out of contention and Ed struggling throughout most of the year, Whitson found himself being heckled by a man in a hotel bar in Baltimore. This obviously didn't sit well with Whitson, who proceeded to grab the man by the neck and throw him up against the wall and strangled him. Well, no surprise, Billy was just an earshot away from all this, and he came up from behind and threw a punch that hit Whitson. In response to Billy's blow, Whitson kicked Martin in the crotch. Then, after being told by the bouncers they were going to have to take it outside, all hell broke loose. The fight in the parking lot left Billy with a broken arm at the hands of the trained martial artist Ed Whitson. Now, in spite of Billy's broken arm, he still somehow led the Yankees to 97 wins, but missed the playoffs by 2 games. In the end, Billy got fired. It was like deja vu all over again. Now in baseball, it's 3 strikes and you're out, or maybe 4 if you have an umpire like Angel Hernandez, but there's no scenario ever that somebody should get 5 chances at doing one job right. That is unless you're Billy Martin. That's right, George Steinbrenner would let the dog back in the doghouse for a 5th time come 1988, and just like every other time, a Yankees turnaround was quickly overshadowed by early summer, following one of Billy's barroom beatings. This time, the tussle occurred on a road trip with his friend, Mickey Mantle, while at his old stomping grounds in Texas. The 2 carousers stopped off at the Lace Strip Club in Arlington. As the story goes, at one point throughout the night, the Yankees coach, Mike Ferraro, drove Mantle back home and left Martin unsupervised. This was a recipe for disaster. Allegedly, the unsupervised Martin went to the bathroom and proceeded to get mauled by two men. The attack was so ferocious that it left the Yankees manager having to get 40 stitches on his left ear. The attack was followed by a tanking of the Yankee ball club, and by June 23rd of that year, the boss booted Martin out again, and he again replaced Martin with Lou Piniella. After his 5th tour as Yankee manager and 9th separate stint as a major league manager overall, Billy Martin decided to slow down and take up farming outside of Binghamton, New York. The life of a farmer seemed to suit the Yankee legend, as it finally seemed, after 50 years, Martin was ready to step away from the spotlight. However, with Billy still living in the state of New York, this left him susceptible to a phone call by the boss. And after the Yankees did not perform in 1988 and 1989, there were rumors that George and Billy were engaging in talks about a possible 6th go-around come 1990. Unfortunately, there is no story about the 1990 Billy Martin Yankees because Martin was unable to ring in the new decade. It was Christmas Day, 1989, and Martin's good friend, Bill Reedy, was in town for the holiday. The two left Billy's house around noon for downtown Binghamton to run an errand. This errand turned into a hunt to find an open bar. That bar would be Maury's. The two would drink for 4 hours. Now, upon their departure from the bar was when disaster struck. The weather conditions while on the ride home was pretty much like anyone would suspect Christmas Day to look like. There was snow, rain, sleet, and black ice. All typical conditions for Christmas, but undesirable conditions for driving, even if sober. Martin's truck would topple over into a ditch, following a left turn while approaching his home. The crash left Reedy with a broken hip and Martin dead at the age of 61. Now, there were conflicting reports of who was driving. At first, Reedy said it was him, but after he got the news Billy was dead, his story quickly changed. He later stated Billy was the one to blame for again. But what was new? Now, as you just saw, Billy Martin was one of baseball's smartest, compelling, loved, hated, interesting, disastrous, and winningest men the game has ever produced. It's truly hard to describe Billy Martin in just one word. That's why I'm going to use 3. In the end, I have to say Billy Martin was baseball's bad boy.